Donald Trump is in a tough spot. With everything going on between the Uyghur concentration camps and Hong Kong, Trump still has to work out a trade deal with China, which is hurting farmers and other manufacturing in this country to a certain degree, depending on who you ask. But here's the main takeaway. What's happening in Hong Kong with the Chinese Communist Party is horrifying. Hong Kong deserves to be independent and maintain its freedoms. It's a very complicated situation, as are most stories. And we also have the concentration camps in China where Uyghur Muslims are being, they're having their organs harvested, and yeah, it's really bad. But here's the thing. Despite all of this, Donald Trump signed into law a bill supporting Hong Kong. It was basically tons of bipartisan support. And there was a lot of concern that Trump wouldn't sign it because he's trying to get this trade deal done. But here's the really difficult position to be in. By signing this, okay, China is vowing retaliation. Here's what the New York Times said. China vows retaliation after President Trump signed new human rights legislation covering Hong Kong. It denounced the law as illegal interference in its affairs. Behind the harsh rhetoric, trade and the softening Chinese economy presents bigger problems. So let's actually check out what this bill is. Again, I want to stress, it's a tough spot to be in. You know, you're trying to negotiate with China and say, we need favorable terms. We need to make sure we can benefit the American economy. At the same time, with Hong Kong and these concentration camps, you can't allow that to continue. By signing this, he has substantially hurt his negotiating power. China's going to be pissed. But if China is dependent upon us, they will be forced to bend the knee. Let's see what happens. First, President Trump signed legislation into law Wednesday that shows American support for Hong Kong protesters in a move that will likely worsen relations with China. This comes amid months of public clashes in Hong Kong that began over an extradition bill. The region's government retracted the bill, but the pro-democracy demonstrations have continued in the streets. Republican Florida Senator Marco Rubio introduced the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, one of two bills Trump signed Wednesday. I signed these bills out of respect for President Xi Jinping, China, and the people of Hong Kong, Trump said in a statement. They are being enacted in the hope that leaders and representatives of China and Hong Kong will be able to amicably settle their differences, leading to long-term peace and prosperity for all. Excellent statement. Seriously, I'm impressed by that. Trump's usually a little bit off the cuff, but that was great. The second bill the president signed bans exporting items such as tear gas and rubber bullets to Hong Kong police. These items are often used for controlling crowds, and I believe a lot of the one major company is based in Pennsylvania. Rubio's bill previously passed overwhelmingly in both the House and Senate, Axios reported. Trump signing these bills admonishes China during a time when the two countries are in the midst of trade talks. China previously warned that it would retaliate if the legislation became law, according to the outlet. I applaud President Trump for signing this critical legislation into law, Rubio said in a statement. Wednesday, the U.S. now has new and meaningful tools to deter further influence and interference from Beijing into Hong Kong's internal affairs. That brings us to the outrage from China. You know what, man? There are a lot of people who demand Trump take counterintuitive measures because they're desperately trying to hurt him. And this is the big political challenge. I mean, it's true not just for Trump, it's for Obama, for Bush, for everybody. The president knows the political opponents will condemn them if they do something that is perceivably bad, right? Perhaps the right thing to do for Trump would not be to sign these bills until a trade agreement was done. But in the end, Trump has decided to sign them. And perhaps that really, I'm not saying it wasn't the right thing to do. I'm saying you have to think about the challenges being faced by this country. And when we sign these bills, look, man, it's already bad with China pressing in the South China Sea, oil exploration, colonization, etc. I gotta say, man, it seems like there's real risks of war with China, especially the concentration camps. I mean, at a certain point, that's got to boil over. For me, I'm already shocked no one's done anything about it so far. I mean, what about sanctions or anything? In the end, this is what's scary about China becoming so powerful. China is such an economic force that we are negotiating a trade deal with them out of fear that we're going to hurt our economy. But meanwhile, China's got concentration camps. What's the right thing to do? If we don't do the trade deal, do we worsen tensions and push ourselves towards war? By signing this bill, do we support our principles but risk war? That's a big challenge. I'm going to have to say it, man. Listen, at a certain point, we need to put our foot down about what they're doing to the Uyghurs in these camps. It is nightmarish. It is literally like horror movies, dystopian novels. So the New York Times reports China condemns U.S. over Hong Kong. That won't stop trade talks. Legislation signed by Trump poses a direct challenge to Beijing's rule, but trade and the softening Chinese economy present bigger problems, and that may be why China ultimately caves. And that's what we want in America. So we can say to them, listen, we have the power, and if you want to deal with us, then you have to stop these things. China might have no choice. Check this out. Hong Kong stocks, 78% collapse, adds to wave of sudden crashes. This is intense. I mean, look, if you're an investor, it might be time to start buying in Hong Kong. 78% collapse in Hong Kong stock. That means you're going to start buying stuff up for pennies in the dollar. That's nuts. Real estate is down. This, I guess Hong Kong special economic zone, whatever you want to call it. They're reeling. Check this out. A third Hong Kong stock in less than a week lost most of its value in a sudden one-day plunge, underscoring concern that the $5.2 trillion market has become a breeding ground for wild volatility. You want to know why China is so angry? It's not just about Hong Kong. It's also about China. Asian markets retreat after Trump signs Hong Kong bill. Asian markets retreated after U.S. president signed a bill supporting Hong Kong protesters, a move that could potentially infuriate Beijing and complicate the U.S.-China trade talks. They say China's Shanghai Composite dropped 0.5%, South Korea's Kospi Index fell 0.4%, Hong Kong slipped 0.2%, while Japan's Nikkei 225 dropped 0.1%. Some Chinese tech stocks advanced in Hong Kong, bucking the weaker trend. Smartphone manufacturer Xiaomi climbed 2.3%. So we get the point. It's not, you know what, man? This might actually all work out. When you look at this, it might actually be what Trump wants. It sounds like it's actually perfect for a trade deal. You think about the turmoil that Hong Kong is going through and how this is negatively impacting China and Asian markets. Trump's effectively saying, you know what? If we come out against you, other people are not going to want to be on board with that. And if we sign this bill, your market's going to go down. And when that happens, you're going to be in a weaker position to negotiate. So in the end, this really does bring us closer and closer to extreme tensions, like militaristic tensions. But if China wants to maintain a strong economy, they're going to have to play ball. I think what we're seeing here is that while China is definitely powerful, they're not powerful enough. So let's see what they're complaining about over at the New York Times. They say, China vented on Thursday after President Trump signed new human rights legislation covering the protest-racked city of Hong Kong. It denounced the new law as illegal interference in its own affairs. It summoned the American ambassador for the second time in a week. It vowed retaliation. Bring it on. The threats sounded severe. They also sounded empty. Ooh, not too good for you, China. Behind the harsh rhetoric, China has few options for striking back at the U.S. in a meaningful way. And it has bigger priorities, namely, the increasingly punishing trade war between the two countries. Though both sides are talking about their willingness to reach a deal, they have yet to sign even an interim pact that would head off potentially damaging new tariffs less than 3 weeks from now. And I'll tell you what, man, record U.S. economy, stock market through the roof day after day, breaking 28,000. Hey, man, we are partying over here in the USA, to quote Miley Cyrus. That's right. China, meanwhile's market's slipping. They got turmoil in Hong Kong. They got international outrage over these camps. And it looks like their position is getting weaker and weaker. Now, they may be pushed into a corner, but I don't think so. I think if there's one thing that will make sure there's not going to be any major war between the U.S. and China, it's the fact that people like being rich. And the rich people in China know that if all hell breaks loose, they're not going to be as rich. And so it is international trade that essentially protects us from war and conflict. We might not like what they're doing, but the trade makes sure that nobody wants to get hurt too much. Now, there's a problem here, because it also means people in America who don't want to risk our economy won't stand up and tell China to knock it off with the concentration camps. And I got to tell you what, man, these camps are horrifying. And I don't know when the appropriate point is to demand like a UN Security Council meeting where every country sanctions China until they stop doing this. I mean, come on. You look at South Africa and the sanctions and everything that went on with apartheid. Now we're looking at China and they're doing something, you know what, I'm going to say, people might get mad, but it's like substantially worse, okay? Like, you want to be racist and have a racist system, we got to stop that. We got to shut that down. But you want to start rounding people up, locking them up, organ harvesting? Dude, Perhaps Trump shouldn't be doing a trade deal until they agree to stop. And maybe Trump should put pressure on him. Because I'll tell you what, we're doing all right. I mean, I get it. There's subsidies going to the farmers. There are some concerns. There is an increasing national debt. But our economy, the stock market is up. Theirs is down. And they're feeling the heat. We got to figure out something about these concentration camps, man. And you know what? I got to say I'm conflicted because I don't know what the answer is. I don't think we want to start World War III with China. But can we just sit by while they do this? That's what's truly horrifying. I know many people might say it's none of our business, but at a certain point, it's the business of humanity. And I can understand, like Afghanistan, right? You know, these small areas and people get their rights abused, and it's really, really bad. But should we be stepping into places like Syria because they're in a civil war? Not really. But what if you had a country rounding people up in concentration camps? And I mean real ones, not like the stupid AOC nonsense where she's like detention centers that people chose to come to are concentration camps. No, I'm talking about people who were forcefully abducted with bags over their heads, thrown in vans, driven to an undisclosed location and tortured and electrocuted and had their organs harvested. At a certain point, we got to say something about that. So, I'll tell you what, it looks like the U.S. is winning the trade war. It looks like China is reeling. It looks like things are bad, and unfortunately for Hong Kong too. But Hong Kong, you better, I mean, you gotta solve this problem. And I think Trump made a great statement on it. But I'll leave it there. Should we fear China's retaliation? You know what, man? Nah, I wouldn't. You know why? I'm the kind of person that would take the risk. If I encounter a situation where somebody wants to step on my toes and push me around, and even if they're bigger and stronger, you just ask for a fight, buddy. So if you want to avoid a fight with me, don't get cocky and don't assume that I'll back down, because I'll go down swinging. That's the risk I'm willing to take. Because if you stand by and allow these people, allow countries like China to get away with this, they'll keep pushing and pushing, and every inch back you take, they will take another mile. So you know what? Even if you're the little guy, you stand up and say, no, you're going to have to knock me down, knock me out. Fortunately for us, we're not the little guy. Though China is comparable in many ways, I think we better make sure that, look, man, you might not like this country. Okay, you might complain about America, but you gotta admit, be it left, if you're a far leftist and you complain about colonization, all that stuff, fine, so be it. But I'll tell you what, everyone can agree what China is doing in these camps is wrong. Everyone. And that is not the country we want to gain global power. And they are. And if we don't check them, if we don't get good deals, if we don't, put pressure on them over Hong Kong, if we don't stand up now, it will get worse. And imagine what happens if we lose the trade war followed by any actual military incursion. I look to a future 100 years from now, and these camps will be commonplace. It will be 1984. It will be the nightmare, and we're walking in that direction. So I'll tell you what, if there's any one thing that should be uniting all Americans, it should be some Democrat and Donald Trump talking about the threat we're facing due to China, and the fact that they're running concentration camps. That should be the message. Let's bring together the far leftist of the lefts. You can be an open borders, communist, globalist, whatever you want to call yourself. I think we can all unite to shut down what they're doing and then get back to bickering in the streets and punching each other. How does that sound? Right? I'm not one to ascribe to the belief the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But I certainly recognize the importance of laying down our swords or pointing them in the correct direction. Because I can disagree with these Antifa types all day and night. I think they're wrong. I think they're violent. But I'll tell you what, there is a time and place for violence. There absolutely is. Self-defense, or self-defense is defined as protecting yourself or the life of someone else. And that at a certain point, we need to recognize that what China is doing is nightmarish, man. It is serious. You got to read this stuff. You really, really do. There was a viral video. Actually, I'll show you the story. There was a viral video this young woman put on TikTok where she was doing like an eyelashes tutorial. And she's like, I'm going to tell you how to get your eyelashes nice and long. So you crimp here and then make sure you Google search Uyghurs in China and the concentration camps. And it was this amazing viral bit she did. TikTok banned her because it's owned by China, or it's however, owned by people in China or whatever. And they reinstated her and apologized. That's good news. But you know what's scary, man? You want to know what's really scary? When the NBA, when celebrities in the United States start defending China, saying, oh, we don't know what's going on in Hong Kong. No way, man. No way. I'm not playing that. I will hold hands with the staunchest of the violent left, insane Antifa wearing people, if it is in the course of shutting down what they are doing to those poor people in their country. I think that's fair to say. We can all agree. We can put our politics aside in this country and figure out a way to deal with what they're doing. Man, I do not want to live in a world where we fight each other to the point where China takes over, because I'll tell you what, they're facing this turmoil over Hong Kong, but for the most part, the U.S. has a special kind of political divide, and that's dangerous. United we stand, divided we fall. And there are a lot of people in this country who completely and at their core disagree with each other. But I think we better start talking about what China's doing, and that should be the unifying force. Look, you know, like if you've ever read Watchmen, you know what brought the world together was an external threat. Long story short, there was a staged extraterrestrial threat which made all of the different countries unite in fear that they would be attacked from an outside force. And that's kind of the idea that, you know, people, you know, it's a trope, right? I'll tell you what, if we start talking about this, if Fox News and MSNBC said we need to do more news on what China is doing, you'd see the political divide start subsiding. Because I can argue with, you know, Uncle Bill or whatever over Thanksgiving dinner, but I'll tell you this. Let me end with this. If you made it this far, I'm going to wrap this up. If you're sitting at Thanksgiving dinner right now watching this, and people are arguing about politics, change the discussion to what China's doing. Change it to Hong Kong. Change it to the Uyghur Muslims, because then you'll all probably agree. And then you can actually say, you might not like Trump. You don't have to like Trump, but we need to talk about China, okay? And maybe Trump's not the right guy, although he thinks he is. You want to have somebody argue for or against Trump? You can tell someone, I know you like Trump, and you know what? Why don't we get someone who's heavily focused on dealing with China? Why don't we back to the best of our abilities what Trump is doing? And if you don't like Trump, then vote for someone who's going to promise to do that. I got to say, man, when it comes to the real existential threats we're facing in this country, I really don't care about, you know, a movie with a woman of color beating me over the head with feminist ideas. Charlie's Angels flopped, you know what I mean? Like, they can make their movie. If it doesn't make money, they won't make any more. It's interesting to talk about these cultural ideas and debate these things in American culture and politics. Meanwhile, we have a real threat growing behind us. So I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. at youtube.com/Timcast, and I will see you all there.